Live tonight from the virtual Pocono Raceway, we say good evening, sim racing fans, and welcome to round 14 of the 2020 Real Sim Racing Full Throttle Cup Series, powered by Boosted. We're happy to have you with us for the Boosted Club 75 from virtual Long Pond, Pennsylvania, as we welcome you into the RacespotTV booth, where, as always, along with our producer Hugo Luis, my name is Evan Pasoko. Happy to be joined by Dylan Coyle on the call tonight. And Dylan, we head to Pocono, 14th race of this 20-race regular season. And as me and you were talking just before we got going here this evening, that win and your in mentality hangs in the balance for some of the drivers still uncertain about their playoff future.
Well, the season is getting close to a playoff time, and once you're actually there, there's no more worrying just about points. You're just worrying about winning and getting in. We don't have to worry about the point racing until there's around 2 or 3 races left. And as you see us on the screen, yeah, it's going to be a great race today, Evan. And I'm glad to join you alongside for the tricky triangle here. Always going to be interesting when it's basically like a road course with 3 completely separate corners.
Yeah, I'm looking all over the place because qualifying happening right now and keeping an eye on those times as they kind of roll in. You know, oftentimes I think we forget, as you mentioned, just how tricky this triangle actually is and how big it actually is. As we go racing tonight for just 75 laps, we're still going racing for 187 miles of action. Here's the point standings coming into this evening, and again, wins locking a lot of those big names in, including the likes of Andrew Friedage, Daniel Eberhardt, Adam Benefiel, and more. But down on the bottom right-hand side of your screen is where it gets interesting, because the buffer is Gary Sexton. So Stanford, McClendon, and then I think a little bit further down, but not out of the conversation, Kuczynski and Steve Soa, a top 20 car for the first time this season. 7 races is a lot, don't get me wrong, but for those drivers, it's going to feel like a mad dash. They need to make up points soon if they want to make that leap.
I mean, it's one thing if we're talking about a 20-point gap, but at 5 points, it's 5 positions. And with 7 races left in the regular season, really anything can happen. I mean, that point swing can happen over the course of, 10 laps or so? Definitely during the 2.5-mile triangle here, as we're following Daniel Eberhardt, the Georgian driver, starting his first time lap here. It's going to be interesting to see how they're going to handle each corner. I've seen some cars slipping and sliding around here. Definitely one of the hardest tracks to kind of master. And I feel like this, Evan, you don't master Pocono, you just learn how to cope with it the best you can.
And the fun thing is, when we talk about typical NASCAR action here, we always talk about those three very different corner sets, 14 degrees in one, 8 degrees in the tunnel turn for turn 2, and just 6 degrees in that flat turn 3 as Daniel Eberhardt looks to improve on a position number 6 in qualifying. It will not happen. He stays best at a 54.333. We always joke about the fact that the setup is always kind of made to give a little bit in some corners and maybe have an advantage in the others, but this is a fixed setup series. It probably doesn't feel great in any of them.
Yeah, and fixed setups, obviously, not all of the fastest sim racers are going to love that, but when you are dealing with the fixed setup, it's basically a spec series at this point. There's really nothing much you can do as the starting grid has been set for this 75-lapper, Evan.
Hey, let's go trackside and take a look at tonight's boosted Dot Club starting grid. And the best time of the ball goes to the Flat Out Motorsports entry of Michael Laraya, a 54.110. Going to put him on pole position. He'll be joined by the number 5 of Rhett McBride in second. Sam Nieto starts from the 3rd spot. He'll double up at row 2 with Brian Chambliss with the number 4 spot on the grid. Austin Wagner and Rhett Nichols next duo in P5 and P6. Daniel Eberhardt will roll from the number 7 spot. Joseph Tice is in 8th. And back on row number 5, you'll find the 24, Grant Davis, back after a couple of weeks out due to some computer issues. He's going to try to fight back into a playoff spot for 9th on the grid, joined by the 13 of Gary Sexton in P10.
And if we continue going down the order just a bit more, Kyle Kammer is going to be in 11th with Liam Sheen starting right alongside him in 12th. Thomas George, John Fowler, Matthew Mara, and Sean Callist are going in rows 8.
And continuing on down through the rest of this, all talk about the final couple of qualifiers. It's Michael Kaczynski, Tom Morano, 18th, 19th position is the last to take a time at queue. So Andrew Friedage, first provisional. Your championship points leader starts from 20th, and the rest all based on the running order in the iRating. So 21st, Dylan Jones, David Washington, 22nd, and it'd be Mogard and Benefiel, Stanford and Durham, Soa and Rodden. 2 apiece. Provisionals for 20th position on back. Missing a couple of the drivers here tonight. A lot of the subpar racing group missing tonight. That's about 3 or 4 cars not here. As well, missing a couple of the drivers participating in the Firecracker 200, the special event with Landon Castle and Parker Kligerman. So about a half a dozen cars not on the grid here this evening from what we were expecting. May actually help us out, though, admittedly, Dylan, to avoid some Pocono racing like we saw yesterday morning and afternoon in NASCAR Truck Series and Xfinity Series action, and where this track really threw those guys for a loop, and it was really a rough and tough race. No quick repairs available in this RSR Full Throttle Cup Series, and something as well to note, for the first time ever, tire set limits instituted. They do have 4 tire sets available. I don't think that's going to really cut it close for them, but if we get a lot of yellows, it might.
Yeah, a lot of yellows might force teams to have to be a little bit cautious about which tires, how many they use, if they're going to get tires, 4 tires maybe, or 2 tires in a stop. Strategy at Pocono Raceway is always all over the place, as we have seen from this past weekend. And if we want to talk about how the Truck Series and Xfinity drivers dealt with Pocono on Sunday, just yesterday, well, the truck drivers had a lot of issues with basically the entire race being run under the yellow. It really helped when the Cup drivers had everything just gripped in, just rubbered into the track. And Evan, I think that these drivers here, they know what they're going to expect with Pocono. It's going to be a great race.
Been a while since we've seen it on a Monday night at RSR competition, but it is back for 2020, and we're so happy that you're with us on RacespotTV. Pace car down it in this time. It's Michael Laraya's field to control as we say, let's go racing from Pocono. We're off. It's round 14. Some 4-3 wide just outside of the top 10. A lot of drivers way deep in turn number 1 as they overshoot it. Heaviest braking quarter on the racetrack. No change though for the race lead. Laraya going to be the first one to turn number 2.
Into turn 2, it's going to be Lariah, like you said, but right behind him, they're side by side. McBride gets free of Sam Nieto and gets back in line. They're in line around 4 back. Brian Chambliss is trying to go down the inside of Austin Wagner and making up a few positions he lost right from the start of the race.
So lap 1, going to go to the number 44 Chevrolet. Already some movers and some drivers headed back. Full running order there, top of your screen, but notably no changes. First, second, and third. There's the on-board look with Chambliss. That's the number 1 machine. On his outside, Joseph Tice, and he'll make it a pass on the bottom. The 13 of Gary Sexton. He is essentially the bubble driver when it comes to the playoff points headed into this evening. He wants to do a good job here, up already 2 positions from the get-go. As looks like the 25 of Chambliss not having the preferred line of the tunnel turn. Now Everhart looking to his inside.
Yeah, Chambliss is dealing with having that outside line, but in the real world just this weekend, it was almost the preferred line for a lot of stints during the entire weekend, and he's going to have a good run coming off turn 3, but he almost slides right up into the wall, and he does force some other drivers, Rhett Nichols and Daniel Everhart, actually, to get all the way down low and try to break that draft.
Yeah, Everhart was basically all the way down onto the apron there. They had a checkered flag pattern as there was just the slightest bit of contact with Chambliss. I saw a little bit of sparks come off the back of the right rear of that 25 Chevy, but all is well. And we continue on without incident. There is, though, your championship points leader, Andrew Fridage. We see this often from him. He is not a driver who looks to lead every single lap. He could probably do it if he wanted to, but oftentimes opts not to qualify. Works his way through the field and sets himself up to be there at the end. Trying to squeeze to the inside of Fowler, who didn't really give him room on the inside there. Now at a turn number 3, he'll look to the bottom. Battle going to be for 16th.
And if we want to talk about what Ferniaz can do during the race, well, his practice speed, his practice time, 54.233. It would have been good enough to get into third, a P3 starting position. So if you don't think he's fast, courtesy of that crib position, well, you're in for quite a surprise during this race.
And you can see he did a good job there in that battle. Fowler did, of staying in front of the 88 machine, but off of the corner wasn't able to carry the speed through. So Fridage gets the spot. That is an early +4 for the number 88 Ford. Of course, there's always $5 bonus on the line with our Doppler Durham on the radar hard charger award. That goes to the biggest mover in a race, but you have to qualify to be eligible. So as we take it on board, look there with Matthew Barr running the VR in position number 12. Fridage would not be eligible for that. You would be looking at somebody maybe like a Liam Sheed making some moves early, or even Mara +3 if he can keep this march towards the front. Mara, an interesting case, just to go back to what we talked about earlier, dealing with playoff qualifications in this series. You need to compete at least half of the regular season races for a possible win to count as your golden ticket into the playoffs. Well, Matthew Barra started his 2020 campaign late. He has only started 1 single race. Now, he has been given a playoff exemption waiver, since it's not like he just didn't want to race in the opening 12 weeks, so he needs a win. He can't points his way in.
Yeah, winning is really all that he's going to have to worry about. And, watching through that VR headset, I wonder how much he thinks that's going to help his performance. I'm not sure if you've ever used a VR headset, Evan, but it can really help when you're trying to hit your apexes, and it just feels more natural than just looking at a normal 2D screen or even a triple monitor setup. So I do wonder if part of the reason he had computer issues, maybe part of it was he was trying to get that virtual reality working again, because really that's what comes down to it. I'm not sure if you've, again, ever used it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on one, though.
Well, there's another look with a VR headset. Rhett Nichols doing a little bit better in position number 6. I've done the VR once, and it was in certainly different context to this. It was Rallycross, and it was pre-release at SEMA a couple of years ago, and it is a totally different level of immersion And I think if I didn't have to broadcast and need screens available, I would go the VR route instead. When I decide to go on track and be mediocre in the car myself,
I
use the triple monitor setup. But it is super cool. It is so realistic, and may help as well. I think on restarts, maybe with this package, just look to your left, look to your right as well. Be able to see the cars next to you. You don't kind of have to look for a hotkey or actually, try to refocus on a different monitor. But there is an impressive number of drivers in this series that opting that VR is the way they want to go. And the two cars that we checked in with, Mara and Nichols, both running in top 12 positions. Now let's go on board with Michael Kaczynski, stationary from the start. He rides P18.
Kaczynski is a second and a half down on Jared Mogard, who is part of that battle for P16 with Grant Davis. Wonder what happened with Kaczynski to lose so much time in the early going here. It was not something that you would have seen from him, as we see that onboard shot, or I guess you could say in-person shot. Not one of the drivers to use a virtual reality headset, but again, it really is up to personal preference a lot of the time. Some good battling, though, right at the front of the pack. Rhett McBride is in the lead, but Michael Larea, well, he is right there through the tunnel turn. It's really a close battle with the top 4 and even going further back to maybe the top 8.
Yeah, last time by the start-finish line, it was actually Rhett McBride with the nose in front by just a little bit, but Lariah was able to get it back from him in the run down to turn number 1. And now it looks like McBride may be under fire. Here comes the number 2 car of Sam Nieto. He'll swing to the inside and use the super long front straightaway run down to turn number 1 as they get set for that Trenton turn. 14 degrees of banking down to 145 miles an hour center off, and it is now to P2. Sam Nieto makes the pass for now.
That was a great sweeping move through that 14-degree turn. You know, Evan, I've actually been driven through that curve going 160 miles per hour at the end of the next straightaway in the actual pace car there. And I can tell you one thing, it melts your face off. So it's a lot easier to not have to deal with those G-forces. You won't be feeling everything that the car is actually trying to kind of communicate to the drivers when you are in the virtual world. It might be one of the odder things that some professional drivers have had to deal with. It's why sim racing is such a different beast than the real thing. You're kind of going more off visual cues than actual physical cues.
And that's where we talk about the difference between VR, single monitors versus triples, because it is all visual, and a little bit of it as well as, I think, listening to audio cues. You can hear the tires slide just a little bit. That is a unique sim racing thing that, of course, these sim racers have had to be adjusted to over the course of their many years of sim racing. A little bit of contact back in the pack. No yellow. John Fowler, Daniel Scott mixing it up 21st and 22nd, but it doesn't take away from the fact that we are still green. You can see them right there. Scott now in front of Fowler. They just got into each other into turn number 1, but we have been incident-free now as of this time by through 10 laps of 75. And I love Pocono. It is a very fun track. It's always fun, I think, to mix things up. I love an IndyCar here, certainly. But this is not a fun track, Dylan, to pace at. So you're looking at like an 8-minute window every time we're going to have a caution flag cycle here. So maybe that's encouraging these drivers to keep it clean. There is, as always, on Monday Night Competition, a 2-hour and 25-minute time window. Don't think that'll be an issue as we race down the back straightaway. And Austin Wagner with a bad quarter exit going to lose 1, 2, 3 spots as Everhart Nichols and Sexton all went around on board with the 13 as he looks to make it a twofer. Can't clear the 55 off of the tunnel turn, and here comes the payback. Wagner now back to his inside.
Wow, they almost collected each other going into the tunnel turn, and that battle is still going to be raging. You might see a little bit of bump drafting from Chambliss right behind in P9 as of the last time they placed around. And by the way, Evan, I'm not sure if you've been noticing, but look is who is in P11 as of right now. It is the championship leader.
And not only has Ferdinand waltzed his way to +9 positions from where he started, but so has the driver behind him, Dylan Jones. Another driver, we talk about some of those special circumstances. Dylan Jones, an RSR veteran, also did not commit to running a 2020 campaign until just 3 weeks ago, so this is only his third start in the Cup Series. He has also been granted a playoff waiver of the 55 drivers who raced in this. There's only about 2 or 3 of them around, but Dylan Jones comes into this evening 47th and more than 300 points out of the points lead. So he's somebody else like Matt Mara, who we talked about earlier, who would likely need a win if he sees postseason action in 2020, and he's following the 88 through the field.
And you've got some great races that are going to come up very shortly. You've got Indianapolis next week, Kentucky the week after. You'll have a couple off weeks with Chicagoland planted right in between them. Michigan, Watkins Glen, one more off week, and then you're basically rolling the dice. You've got Daytona International Speedway as the cutoff before the playoffs. And I'll tell you what, Evan, there's really no guessing who is going to be in from that bubble right now. There are so many drivers that have the potential to be in, and there are so many drivers we aren't even thinking of right now. And as long as they've run half of the regular season, they can get in. We might not even be seeing exactly who can make the playoffs. It's going to be a great run till the end of the season. But as you're following now with live pictures at Pocono, you just try to get back in line and get into that draft as you head down towards turn 1. If you can't get on the inside there, though, you're going to have a tough time trying to get back on the throttle and by the guy in front of you who is on the outside.
And you could see a decent amount of rubber put down as well. More rule modifications for this week is, as always, the track usage. So the rubber put down from practice is carried over through qualifying, through to the race. But normally these drivers have nearly an hour and a half of practice on the track every single week. That was modified this week to 30. So you have a little bit of a greener racetrack than these drivers may be used to. Still looks like, of course, you can see it even down there in turn number 3, a healthy amount of rubber put down. But again, may be different from how worked in these racetracks have been off of the get-go for most of the season. We did see, of course, that first trip off into turn 1, just how many cars missed the mark and went way up and in to the nasty stuff. An early pit stop for Liam Sheen. Would have to think that this is not scheduled because he was running in position 13, but he is down to the pit stall early, and Liam Sheen, for whatever reason, is going to come in for service only 15 laps into the race. It could be a very early undercut. As mentioned, 4 sets of tires available. That is essentially 5 sets. That does not count the set that you start with. So there are 4 sets of tires available in the pits, and that'll be his first set as he's the first driver in for service at all tonight.
Well, I can tell you one thing. Liam Sheen was actually hit from behind coming out of turn 3 by Kyle Kammer, and that is not what anyone would have wanted to see. He actually is not that happy in the live chat between both drivers at the moment. Just going into turn 3, there was nothing more to it except Kammer just got into the back of him, made him spin. Not too much damage. He was able to keep it right off the wall before slowing down into pit lane. And, well, unfortunately for him, he was also caught speeding and has a 40-second hold in the pits. So that's really going to ruin his race.
Yeah, he skid through the grass. That's why he wasn't able to slow that car down. Pit speed here at Pocono, 55 miles an hour. He was doing about 76 when he hit the commitment cone. So he had that 40-second hold penalty, likely for excessive speeding in the pits. And because of that, Sheen is going to fall at least 1 lap down in the very early goings here. And I think it will be about a lap and a half off of your race leaders as Michael Araya still sits up in front. Somebody that we hadn't really talked about in a little bit, but has dropped back is Rhett McBride, that 5 car who had been out there battling for the race lead. Remember, it actually led a lap when he was nose-to-nose with Lariah at the start-finish line. He is now down in P5, and I think more at risk of losing more than gaining anything anytime soon, because look at the host of race cars lined up behind him, including Nichols, Sexton, and George.
Well, remember, you get a bonus point, 1 bonus point for leading a lap. So for at least McBride getting into the lead for at least that 1 lap is going to help out while we do talk about the point standings. But you're right, there is a hungry pack of bumblebees, those drivers that are really chopping at his bits right now, and I don't think he's going to be able to hold them all for so long. They're so nose to tail that draft is really going to help them, and Rhett McBride has fallen to a 2nd behind Daniel Eberhardt, and when you have a 2nd disadvantage and drivers are closing in on you very quickly, well, there's not much you can do there, especially on the straightaway in which you could land an airplane at Pocono.
It looks like he's got his sim rig in the garage or somewhere. If he looks to his left-hand side, he's going to see Gary Sexton on his door. There's contact there. You can see Nichols turn that car back to the right to try to hang on as Sexton pinched him up against the outside wall.
And look who's going to try and take advantage
of that.
Look at Dylan Jones. He's taking advantage of the situation. Saw the slowdown midway through the trickiest part of this triangle, the tunnel turn, and then he gets to the outside of both drivers. Now it's Gary Sexton that's at danger of being overtaken. And look at this, Andrew Fernayars, he is right there as well.
The big thing that we missed out on is we watched some of the other battles further up the field as Jones was able to leapfrog Friedage. They had kind of been following each other, as we mentioned, to top 10 spots, but because Dylan Jones was able to pass the 88, he's the one that gets first crack at all these drivers. So Dylan Jones now up to 7th. Friedage likely to follow. He's only about a half a car length off of the back bumper to Gary Sexton. If the 13 and the 55 see each other once more, I would keep a half eye on that, because I don't think either of them are happy with how that one ended. But how long can you hold off these drivers that as well? Is this green flag run actually hurting Jones and Friedage more than it is benefiting them? Because, yes, Dylan, they've made their way up 14 positions in the case of Jones, 11 in the case of Friedage, but they're 3.5 seconds off for the race lead, and they're running about equal lap times with the race leaders, maybe a 10th or so faster. So if this stays green, puts them at a significant disadvantage as they've got the positions, but they need the track position, and they're both going to go for a pass now in the run to turn 2.
The big thing you've got to worry about there is they are at a disadvantage when we're talking about tire wear compared to their competitors right around them. They've used up a lot more of that rubber to try and get from the back of the pack all the way up to the front, and in that march they're definitely going to be using a lot more of the tire than the rest of the drivers around. And the other thing, right now Farinas is kind of boxed out, as Dylan Jones is as well, but Jones has some clear air in front. I don't think he's going to be able to clear Rhett Nichols though, but they're right there to get into that lead pack, the leading pack, which is currently 2 seconds ahead. And if there is some battling, which there has been at front, and you can get clear of all of these 4 other cars right in this vicinity, 5 if you're counting the driver of the number 9 car, Thomas George, then you could possibly get some nice speed with the help of the draft to try and catch up to the leading cars. Now, obviously, a yellow, Evan, will really help a lot, and I don't think we're not going to see a yellow. Remember, we're only on lap 21. There's a lot of racing left to go, and Pocono has its flair for the dramatics.
You're on the board there with Friedage as this 2 sets of 2x2 racing continues. Donna George behind all this was getting really tight with all the dirty air, and they get a single file it out at a turn number 3 with the 11 Dylan Jones winning that battle against Nichols. He moves into a race high position 6. Here's some blocking though. A big run by George. He's the 9 car. Saxon blocked him. Now it's Friedage to the inside on the 55 of Rhett Nichols. He'll make that pass.
Ooh, Thomas.
Turn
George, watch out.
He's too tight. George across the nose of Sexton. They both get the fence a little bit, but they hang on and will stay green. Way too much dirty air for the Don to get back into the gas that early.
Well, guess who that helped out more than anyone? Both Dylan Jones and Andrew Verniaz, as we see the replay here. Yeah, just getting a little too tight. Almost made a dangerous accident for all the drivers right around there. But if Jones and Verniaz are smart, they're going to try and work together. And Rhett Nichols is right behind them as well. They've got some clear space. They have around a 2.5 second disadvantage, almost 3 seconds, that they're going to have to cut down. And again, they can do it, especially if the drivers in front are competing with each other as hard as they have been. We've got some two-wide racing with some of the drivers at front, Evan.
And the onboard look with Joseph Tice is the best view of it. He's in fourth. The battle was between the two of Nieto and that 94 who slides up now in front of him of Daniel Eberhardt. But Eberhardt, in hopes of trying to make a pass on the Nieto, opened up the door briefly there. That's why we saw Tice actually trying to make an outside move for position number 3. But it all single files out for a brief moment. McBride, in fact, not that far behind either. The 5 was the best car on track last time by, about 3/4 of a second faster than all the cars up the road. Now that time by, best lap back to the race leader, Michael Laraya. As Joseph Tice makes that move on Eberhardt, this could become a 4-way battle for P2 shortly. If that AMSOIL number 5 Chevy gets into the picture, into the 90 car sideways that time into turn 1.
I've been watching all of these drivers. They're getting sideways, all of them. That air coming off the front of the drivers in the lead, it's starting to really affect everyone, especially that tire wear. And Evan, I am not sure about you, but I know in the last few seasons, there have not been too many green flag pit stops at Pocono Raceway in this series. I think we might be seeing it soon. Where is this pit window for these drivers?
It's interesting as well because, you know, the last time we were here at Pocono, we didn't even get to run a full race. This event was scheduled and actually stopped short of full distance because of what we called a rain delay, which was essentially just a massive issue with the race server. So we really didn't know how well these cars worked with this package. Of course, we could kind of look back to 2018 and furthermore on what the strategy would be, but there is no apples to apples comparison. But you know, 75 laps makes the math easy enough on me. And it helps because if we were looking at a 2-stop situation, you would be pitting now. This is 1/3 distance in this boosted Club 75. So if we start to see drivers come down to the pit lane, I feel like they would have tipped their hat already and done it by now as this battle for second rages on. So I think we're going for a 1-stopper if we can stay green and if we can make this work 3 wide for position number 2 in the run down to turn 1. Eberhardt pulls the parachute. He jumps out of that and will drop to 4th. And it is now Tice on the inside of Nieto.
The question is if all of these drivers can stay in the clean part of the track and not get into the marbles as they've been doing so in the previous few laps. Look at that. We're bump drafting right now. Daniel Eberhardt right on the outside, pushing Nieto into second, clear of the traffic right behind. And Joseph Tice, he's going to have to drop back into 4th place in line. And for the first time in I don't know how many laps, we're going to have some single file racing around a corner here between drivers 2 through 5.
Okay, that's one way to make a lane open up. Daniel Eberhardt had that run on the outside, had nowhere to go, so he just pushed Sam Nieto on through, and it in fact allows both of them to clear Tice. So I thought Tice was going to be the big winner as they went 3 wide off into turn 1. He was on the inside. Instead, he maintains P4, and he'll have to try to reset that up and go at it again if he wants to be in this battle. You're looking off of the back of Nieto, nearly into the fence that time was Eberhardt, and You talk about Pocono being like a road race in the sense that the corners are all very different, that I think really in the fact that you have such long straightaways. I mean, every corner exit and long straightaway run is a passing zone because you need to make sure you carry so much momentum through the corner, because if you don't, you're going to get bit on any of the 3 straightaways here at Pocono because they're all so long.
I'll tell you one thing, though. The one guy who's happy right now that this is basically like a road course and these drivers are struggling, it's Larea. He is right at the front of the pack. He's 2 seconds ahead of Sam Nieto and his friends back in 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And if you're Michael Larea, you're just hoping that they keep battling it out. He's got no drafting help either, but it doesn't really matter when drivers are battling for position behind, because if they're, I always like to say this, Evan, especially if we are watching some road racing. If drivers work together more, there would be more battles for position at the front of the pack. But sometimes all you see is a spot to gain, and you're not thinking, let's work together. You're thinking, I want to be in front of you and not work with you, unless you're teammates. That's another thing.
And we've even seen some teammates have disagreements over the years, as there's Eberhardt now to the inside of Nieto. Got the spot, but making that move halfway through the quarter, not going to lead to a lot of straightaway speed. So Nieto about a mile an hour faster than Eberhardt in the run down to turn 1. And when you multiply that over the course of the front stretch, it clears the number 2 Ford Mustang. So he will now go defensive mode to battle again. This is all for 2nd. Eberhardt gonna try again. Your race leader is still Michael Larea. He's now 2 seconds up the road, as Eberhardt should have a good look here into the tunnel turn.
Some great clean racing from all of these drivers. Too wide through the tunnel turn, and Eberhardt gets up a little bit, does not run into Nieto, who gets a push from behind by the number 1 blue car of Joseph Tias. Tias is going to try and push him wide and get down the inside coming out of turn 3. Eberhardt gets up into the outside lane, and they almost touch just because of that momentum carrying them all the way to the wall. But look who has the best run out of turn 3. It's Joseph Tias into turn 1.
It looked like the Thunderbirds that time across the front stretch, a diamond formation in this battle for 2nd through 5th, and it is kind of all in a bubble. They're 2 seconds behind race leader, and they're about 3 seconds ahead of the next closest car, Andrew Friedage, who has gotten back around Dylan C. Jones in 6th and 7th. And again, it is part of the track and in part the package why these cars are staying stuck together. Another bobble this time by Tice. Caught it quickly. That little bit of momentum loss could open up the door for the number 5. It's McBride to the inside for 3rd. It is just so tricky to make that stick at the inside of turn 3 with only 6 degrees of banking to work with. The outside pays off once more, and now here comes Nieto swinging to the outside. He'll look to drop the 5 back to 5th.
I was taking a look at past hit windows in real world NASCAR races at Pocono, and from what I've seen, it's around laps 28 to 35 on a clean green flag run. So I would be looking at some of these drivers diving into the pits very soon. Now, do they have enough to go an entire race that is run and green on one pit stop? Possibly. But they're going to have to stretch the fuel a big distance. I mean, 1 lap here at Pocono, it's 2.5 miles. That is a lot of fuel that you have to be understandably burning less of throughout the entire racetrack. 3 corners so differently, and when you're in a battle as big as this, do you really want to save fuel? Do you really think this race is not going to have any cautions? It's going to be caution-free for the remainder of this race. I'm not sure I would be willing to take a gamble on going with a 2-stop strategy, at least while no one else does it. My thing always is, Evan, if the guy in front of you goes in, and you see Joseph Tias gets into the wall coming out of turn 1, Sam Nieto is able to take control of that position, Evan.
And that was all on his own. He was the lead car in that battle. It's not like he got stuck behind anybody, but he just got checked way up, and you can see the evasive action there. The RacespotTV replay taken by Nieto and McBride to get by, so they will now cycle back to third and fourth, and that will drop Joseph Tice now down into P5. And at this right now, it is no longer courtesy of that huge mistake, a big buffer behind, because Tice only half a second now ahead of the next closest driver, and it is in fact a set of 2 drivers in 6th and 7th. Faridaj and Jones continue to drive their way through the field on the scoring pylon. Last time we checked in with them, they were further down the running order, but they were also only 3 seconds off of the race leader, Dylan. Now they're more than 5 seconds off of the race leader, so further away from Lariah, but further up the running order. You're on board with Jones looking to Faridaj. The next car up the road, at number 1, Joseph Tice, who made that big mistake. Otherwise, he would have been well clear of these drivers for some time.
82.5 miles for Michael Larea, who just crossed the finish line, an average full tank of a NASCAR Cup car. Well, that's about as much as you can possibly go. Again, I just do not see them being able to make one stop unless there is a caution. I feel like if this is green the entire way, you're going to have to look at a two-stop race, that is, as Dylan Jones is going to take advantage of Farinaz having a little bit of a going wide issue out of turn 1 and going into the tunnel turn. That gap, it's growing, and right now it's Dylan Jones' mission.
They exchange it once more. This has gone back and forth now, at least to what we know, at least now 3 times. But these cars are so incredibly even. So, not even talking about the fact that they may need a yellow. This race still, admittedly, with 41 laps to go this time by, they could have a chance if the strategy works out for them and they can maximize every little bit, every single time by. But even that last time, they lose more time now, almost 6 seconds off of Michael Lariah at the front of the field. Your top 4, the only driver still running 56-second lap times. But say we get a yellow, say we get a restart, I have no doubt Jones and Faridaj could enter that conversation with the 44 as having a good chance to win this race. But which of those 2 is better? That's something I'm going to keep an eye on, because they look very, very even. Watching a different battle now down the back straightaway. That's the 8 of Kyle Kamer, ahead of a battle now between Thomas George and Gary Sexton. The number 9 car to the inside of the 13 Ford. Can't make it work down there on the bottom, the outside. A little bit more legs to that after it did not work at all at the start of this run.
I always get worried coming out of the tunnel turn. Some drivers are not always aware if they are clear or not. And when you have to kind of slide up there to get any momentum into the short chute into turn 3. Oh, there's a caution out, by the way. We'll try to figure out who it is. But strategy, it's changed. It's Koshikny.
So Kaczynski around on the back straightaway, and let's see what happened here into the tunnel turn, and he had some assistance. That was very similar to what we saw at a Kyle Busch and Ryan Blaney yesterday in the Cup race, but this was all for position. Kaczynski went to tuck in line, and right there, Dylan, he had to check up, and when he did so, John Rodden with a big run got into him and turned him.
Yeah, his name's not Koshikny, by the way. It's my first race. Got to give me a break here. But Kaczynski, it's amazing how many crazy names some drivers have when you're just trying to get into a series for the first time. And we aren't even talking about hockey, that Montreal Canadian Vegas Golden Knight fan you are.
Well, hockey is as well, one of the trickier ones, but I'm happy that I stick to the oval racing, because you want to talk about tough names. The road racing side of things is a totally different animal, and I could have, 24 hours of prep, and I wouldn't know. We were joking earlier as well, even. Some of these guys have been in this RSR Cup Series for 6-7 years, and you can never quite get the name down to a science either. But one driver, right when that caution flag came out, said this yellow may have just saved me. So this is very timely and is almost at halfway. We will probably restart with about 35, 34 laps to go. We know they can do that distance now because, well, we're currently pacing a lap 37, and we have been green since the start of the race. So this could be, if we see no more incidents, the only time these drivers have to be on pit road tonight.
I was really hoping for some green flag stops because you never know what's going to happen. And if you are coming off a green flag stop and then the yellow comes out in the middle of everyone's strategy, well, it just turns the entire game sideways. But it looks like the pits are open. Michael Lorea is going to bring the field down to this 55-mile-per-hour long straightaway pit lane. And we're going to have to see what happens here. Michael Lorea is the one that won't be happy about that yellow and has the most to lose here, Evan.
And let's see how well they can execute. Does the number one pit stall maybe give Lorea a benefit here when it comes to the race off for the pit lane? That pit lane exit line not as close to the number one pit stall here at Pocono as it is at some other tracks, so it may not stand to benefit him that much. But everybody down pit road for the first time for all but the car that we saw pit earlier in this race in Liam Sheen. It's going to be a four-tire decision, rights then lefts, and unchallenged off of the pit lane. Easy does it for Michael Lorea. 15.3 seconds in the stall. He will maintain the race lead.
We had 3 wide for one of the positions in the top part of the order. We're going to have to just make sure all of those cars went unscathed, because when you are talking about live pit stops, you're always going to be worried about the other cars involved in the incident. And we see right here Liam Sheen, he might end up being the lucky winner of that pit stop, but I'm not sure, Evan, if he's going to get that pass to go in front. He's going to have to go into the pits as well, but at least, you know, being the first lap down, that's going to count for something, right?
He's doing what he can. He wants to, of course, try to get himself that lap back. He's the only driver really in that situation. On that run, John Fowler, who had a little bit of damage, did opt to bring his car down to the pit lane as he was running in 25th position. He had some contact with Steve Soa that we did not see initially. It did damage Fowler's car a little bit, and he opted to bring it to the garage. His night is done. So only Fowler out of this race. So what Liam Sheen could really use, as it looks like he is not going to pit, is a lucky dog. He is going to get waved around, get his lead lap back, and with the lights out on top of the pace car this time by, Dylan will not have time to pit, so he's going to be in the camp of wanting a quick yellow.
Yeah, quick yellow is going to be wanted, and I've got to tell you, Evan, I mean, we're at Pocono, and with that huge front straight, and I'm not talking about the length, I'm talking about the width. Really, anything can happen when it does come to the restart. You gotta be careful if you were on the bubble. Not so much some of the point leaders, or wins leaders, I should say, in the playoff standings. They've got not much, they don't really have that much to lose. But if we're talking about guys who are placed around, 16th in the standings, if we're talking about a driver who is just in right now, like Brian Chambliss or Scott McClendon, those kinds of drivers, those bubble drivers, this really, really matters to them.
It does, and you were previewing the schedule coming up a little bit earlier on in this one. I mean, at the end of this regular season, you mentioned Daytona. You got a road course race in there, and Watkins Glen. If I'm not comfortable with my road racing skills, and who knows what's going to happen at Daytona, I need to get everything I can at a Pocono, Indy, Kentucky, and Chicago, maybe even in Michigan as well, because those bubble drivers are going to be awfully nervous headed into those final couple of weeks, critical weeks in determining who the 16 cars will be to fight for this 2020 Full Throttle Cup. Only one caution, though, so far in this boosted Club 75. Pace car going to be off this time. Control car, the number 44 Chevrolet of Michael Lariah. Green flag flies. 36 laps to go, and the outside line did not get going. More cars even for the inside. Looking to the bottom as here comes Eberhardt. 4-5 wide through the field. A challenge for the race lead to turn 1.
Yeah, that was some intense action on the outside. No one could really seem to get going. And when that happens on a close restart, everything just backs up and drivers start to hit each other in the rear bumper. It's amazing that no one got out of shape or spun on the front stretch right here. But look at this, some battles into the tunnel turn 2 wide, maybe even 3 wide. Some drivers are thinking about it. And look at the front battle. It's going to be Michael Larea who is falling back to Daniel Eberhardt. And right now, oh, there's a yellow out, by the way. A caution has come out. And there's a big crash in the tunnel turn. Daniel Scott has been turned around, as are a few other drivers. That is what happens in that turn.
And that was cutting a gap that did not work. Watch it right there. Daniel Scott with the number 98 machine to his inside of David Washington. And I think tried to split a difference, and it did not work. It looked like Washington moved up as well, so they both kind of just came together. This is going to be the best angle. Washington comes up, Scott comes down, and the 96 turned hard into the inside fence.
And look who was one of the unlucky drivers there. It's Michael Kuczynski, another driver who, or the driver that was involved in the incident earlier going, the one that brought out the yellow right before this one. Well, he's going to have some severe damage to try and deal with. And I definitely think, Evan, things have slowed down here quite a bit.
And the one driver who likes that, Liam Sheed, because he got the wave around the last time through. Now he can get fresh tires, likely able to go to the end of this race and try to get a first real good shot at this thing after being a lap down due to contact so very early on in this one. So we're under our second caution flag, working lap number 41 of 75, and a new race leader in Daniel Eberhardt is pacing the field. We'll take a quick opportunity to step aside, and when we come back, another restart from Pocono. You're watching RaceSpot's coverage of the 2020 Real Sim Racing Full Throttle Cup Series, powered by Boosted.
We are back at North Wilkesboro, North Carolina, where the field is rolling out for the start of today's 400-lap race on this .625-mile racetrack. And just as the field comes all around turn number 4, the sunshine peeks through, helping warm things here. Bill Elliott leads him down. Benny Parsons on the outside. The green flag flies, and the first Union 400 Winston Cup race from North Wilkesboro is underway. Everybody nicely through turns number 1 and 2 as Bill Elliott has the lead, and Dale Earnhardt has jumped into second position, followed by Benny Parsons and Bobby Allison. So here we go. It's just about to go away. They both coming out of turn 4. Earnhardt gets the lead. We had just heard from our spotters that Neil Ryan. Dale Earnhardt is on his last lap. This will be his 24th career win. Dale Earnhardt wins the first Union 400 at North Wilkesboro.
And back live for the virtual Pocono Raceway, where RacespotTV's coverage of the RealSimRacing Full Throttle Cup Series continues tonight with Boosted Club 75. As always, our action tonight powered by Boosted, the place where gamers and creators go to monetize digitally. Their team will build you a totally free e-commerce store to help get sponsorships for those looking to build their brand online. Go to boosted.club for more information. Happy that you're with us. Evan Pasoko, Dylan Coyle, our producer Hugo Luis downstairs as we get set to put caution number 2 on the night behind us. And Dylan, after running so long without incident, we're slowed down for the second time in 5 laps.
2 times, 5 laps. Not surprising, though. We saw the outside lane really get held up by some spinning of the tires from the front row, and when that happens, everyone's going to be bunched up. Things are going to get real crazy, and it kind of has an accordion effect from the front stretch to the, I guess not the back stretch, but the long pond straight between turns 1 and 2. That's where the action all happened going into the tunnel turn. Now, I do want to mention real quick, as we're a little bit over halfway through this race, the Upper Durham on the Radar Hard Charger Award, which awards $5 to the biggest mover each race as long as they've qualified. Well, Daniel Eberhardt, he's moved up 6 spots currently, believe it or not. That is the driver who would win that award. Started 7th, currently in 1st. We would like a lot more than that award, though.
He wants to get the race win as well, looking for a possible second trip to victory lane this season at these kind of unique racetracks. Most of them are on the intermediates. In fact, actually all of them. Charlotte, Kansas, and Atlanta. He's kind of known as the cookie cutter guy. Can get it done here tonight at the Tricky Triangle. So let's try this again. Pace car down and in this time, and a restart with 32 laps to go in the Poconos. Green flag flies are backing away, and a much better jump for the race leader this time. The outside line got going much better as well. Eberhardt tries to make the draft. He wants to maintain the lead. 3 wide back in traffic to turn 1.
Andrew Farinars, excuse me, he gets 3 wide at the low spot and is going to capitalize, but a crash right in front of him. It's going to be Sam Nieto that gets spun out, hits the inside wall. Another caution immediately following that turn 1.
And it was a faster 11 to Dylan Jones on the bumper, and you could see that 2 car was loose the entire time through turn number 1, and the 11 just would not get off of him.
Yeah, definitely something to be a little bit upset about if you are Sam Nieto, and that's something you don't really see from Dylan Jones, who, like the points leader in Andrew Farinars, excuse me, has started from the back without any qualifying. I would be upset if I was Nieto, excuse me, with Dylan Jones. But if you're getting loose right with traffic and going into the marbles on the outside lane out of turn 1, what do you expect to happen? Things are going to get crazy. It's not a surprise at all, Evan, that just ended up in a calamity of sorts.
So now 3 cautions back to back to back has slowed down once more. Dylan Jones will claim responsibility for the incident, which means that even though he took all race long to work his way from 21st to 5th, that he will receive an end of the longest line penalty. He's going to have to go all the way back for the next restart. So that really hurts the 11 car. And I don't know if it hands the advantage solely back into the favor of the 88 of Farinars, because, I mean, they were good. They are good. Don't get me wrong. I mean, they worked their way through the field, but I mean, I think Eberhardt, Lariah, Benefield, McBride, and those drivers making an awfully good case that they're not going to let Farinars just come up here and walk all over them. But certainly, if Dylan Jones was planning on winning this race, it's going to be awfully difficult now.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult, not only because of the drivers around him knowing that there's a little bit of aggression to be held. And by the way, pit stops again. Oh, and look at that, a little bit of trickery from Daniel Eberhardt and Michael Lorea just deciding to go with him. However, one driver who did bite, as we're trying to see in the pits, there's a few more coming behind, but from that very front of the pack, they did have a biter, trying to see exactly who that was to do it. But Sam Nieto is one of those drivers in who's definitely needing some damage repair. It's not necessarily a bad thing, Evan, to go into the pits, especially if you're going to be near the end of the line anyways, because you're going to need some fresh tires to get some good lap times around Pocono. There's just no way to avoid it. Fresh tires, it can lead to even a second a lap quicker than some drivers on some old tires.
And I think the lead car we saw pit was Dylan Jones. No shock there because, of course, he is going to have to serve the end of the longest line penalty anyway. So the other real takers, if you would, are Nieto and Kaczynski. They get, I believe, what is their second set of fresh tires put on the car. Again, I did not think coming into this race that the 4-tire limit of tire changes available was going to play a huge factor unless we had a caution-filled race. Now, we got to the halfway point, so I think we're going to be fine anyways, but, I mean, it could make things interesting if we get stuck in this stop-start, and drivers more frequently want rubber. But again, the majority of the field who did not pit, that being your top 16, they have been on their tires and they've only used one set. They still have 3 in reserve. So we're not at a risky point yet, but just something to note is that could be a factor, I think, if we have a lot of yellows. Of course, keep in mind as many as 3 attempts at a green, white, checkered finish should we need that. But honestly, with 29 laps still to go on the board, I think that's far
I feel
from
like
a concern
if we
right
do
now.
have any bit of overtime here at the end of the race, I don't know exactly how important fresh tires will be, especially if we're talking about a pit stop probably 10 laps before that. Because what is more important, Evan, in your eyes at this track? Is it track position, or is it having a fresh set of tires? Because obviously anything can happen, and if you are starting even back in 10th, there's a chance that you can get back into the lead in 2 laps, but there's just so many factors that have to play into your hands. And if I'm thinking about whether or not to go into the pits and I'm in, say, 12th place, and there is a little bit of overtime, which again, 28 laps from that point, we're not there yet, but I would think of possibly just staying out, because track position at that point would be more important to me than anything else.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I think that because of the way that just this racetrack is laid out, we talked about some of the big separation points on that first long green flag run. 5 seconds between a pack of cars and the next. I do think track position would be key. But of course, if it was that easy to determine which strategy was the right one, I should say, well, we wouldn't even have this conversation, because you could look into your crystal ball and figure it out. So should you see some unpredictable situations, will cars go for the track position? Absolutely. Will other drivers opt to go for the tires, even if they feel like it's a bit more of a gamble? Absolutely. I think a lot of that's going to have to do with where you sit in the points coming into this evening with already 13 races in the back pocket. Pace car off and in once more. Haven't been able to get more than a lap on for the restart since halfway home. Green flag flies. It's Eberhardt again in the race to turn number 1. Again, these drivers can't start the fan out till they get past the start-finish line. No lane changing before. Now there's some blocking way behind. That's Sexton in battle mid-pack, but it is Eberhardt maintaining in turn 1.
Some of these drivers are getting really wide heading into turn 1, and as they all come back up the track trying to get the best run possible, you see maybe 4 wide in the back of the field. That's going to be something to watch out for as this restart continues to get underway, and Lorea has been shuffled from P2 already into 4th place as he watches Daniel Eberhardt and the rest of the field start to move just a little 10th of the way in front off of him.
Before that caution flag, shy of halfway home, Michael Lariah was more than 2 seconds ahead of anybody else. Now look at them snake down the front straightaway, all trying to break the draft off of the car in front. Not just those top 4, but you can see it mid-pack as well as like a battle for 11th or so. He's 3 wide off it into turn number 1, but the race leaders have started to single file things out. The craziness is Grant Davis in the 24 car on back. You can see Gary Sexton on his bumper. Down to the inside. It goes McBride. Can he hold off, or will Benefiel make the outside work in the tunnel? Yes, he does. Benefiel takes second, and for the first time tonight, Andrew Farinaj, a top 5 car, and he wants more. He looks down to the inside of the 5. He wants third.
Yes, he absolutely wants third, and we were talking just a few laps before those caution flags. Is it going to be Dylan Jones or Andrew Fernandez who is going to be the top driver starting from the back of the field today? Well, I think we have the answer. It's the number 88 machine, the points leader in Fernandez, as he's trying to, again, stay just in line into turn 1, has some drivers behind him who are also just playing very kindly, wants to get the big run coming off of turn 1 into the tunnel turn. Hard to make a move if you don't already have some clean position down the inside. But again, just trying to stay in line and heading into the short chute. It's really going to be whoever gets the biggest jump into 3. And look who is going down the inside of Brett McBride. Evan, it's Fernandez.
Michael Lariah's got a good look at it. Does the 44 decide to go 3 wide? He tucks in line to behind Faridaj. Does he go? No. He'll stay to the bumper. Give the 88 a little bit of a push and assist him in the side-by-side fight for third. And McBride missed turn 1. 2 cars going to get on through. Farinaj and Lariah. And it may be more still to come, because now Nichols for a moment peeked to the inside. Can't make it happen, but 1 missed quarter entry is going to cost that Fabi McBride 2 positions. He falls to 5th.
It wouldn't have mattered all that much if it was in this short chute, but because of how long the Long Pond straightaway is, it's going to end up costing him. Obviously, what it already has could cost him more, because when you're at a track like Pocono, just 1 missed chance, 1 opportunity that you blow, even if it's into turn 1, 2, or 3, it can lead to a lot worse repercussions, as we see Eberhardt just spinning, or not spinning it is, but spanning all the way across the front straight. He goes to the outside. It's going to give the race lead up to the number 83 car.
And not only does he lose 1, he may lose 2 as he looked to bobble on the outside of turn 1. So Faridaj got to the bottom. He'll have the better run out of turn 1. So down in the race to the tunnel turn, Donnie's got more speed, but nowhere to go with it. Faridaj now onto the bumper of Benefiel. The 90 going to squeeze in line. That's Eberhardt, the race leader, excuse me, as we have 6, 7, 8 cars within nearly a second of your race leader, all stacked up on one another, and Eberhardt will maintain for the time being, but it is the 88 car of Faridaj, now a race high P2 and
Yellow
a caution flag.
Yellow flag. There was some action in the back of the pack. The number 2 car of Sam Nieto has really smashed into the wall and destroyed his race. He has disconnected. He is done.
And we'll see the replay here. The 10 car of Durham just a little bit loose. Hooks him around, and he collects the 24. He collected Stanford for a moment, and Sam Nieto, you mentioned, we had just seen him in an incident a little bit ago. He's the 4th car in this. Let's look from high above.
Yeah, once you get all the way to the outside, you're just balancing back into the inside lane, and there's not much you can do there. You're just a passenger at that point, and you've got to feel bad for some of the drivers who weren't even involved in that initial part of the incident. We're watching it again. just a bit of a touch, a wheel hop. I don't even think there was much of a touch there. Two drivers got really into it, and obviously you see some big action happening right at the end of turn 3. Just a lot more action than I actually originally thought happened there in terms of which drivers ended up hitting which drivers. But nonetheless, if we're talking about those tires, and we're talking about them for sure, some of the racers have decided to, or will probably decide if they haven't already, to head down into the pits to get some fresh rubber onto the car with 21 laps to go as they cross the line here, as Andrew Ferdinand is the first one to go into the pits. It actually appeared that he had the lead as that yellow was thrown.
Yeah, so Ferdinand is going to be the first driver in, thinking that through all of the chaos in that battle for the race lead, that there may have been a small connection issue, of course, with the other car in that battle, and because of that, scoring handed the race lead off to the 88 machine of Ferdinand. So he's going to end up in a better position than everybody else. In fact, I think Benefiel going to miss an entire lap due to the scoring bug. Ferdinand is going to come in for 4 tires. He will be the first car off of the pit lane with a 15.2 second stop, and 2 drivers opted not to come down to pit road. Matthew Mara, not pit. He was on the same tires as everybody who just came down to pit road, so that's 17-lap old tires. But Kyle Kamer pitted a little bit more recently. His tires are only 9 laps old, and he'll stay out to assume second.
That's kind of what we were talking about when we were saying what's more important.
We are back at North Wilkesboro, North Carolina, where the field is rolling out for the start of today's 400-lap race.
He's right now on the bubble. He's currently in the playoffs as we speak, but not by terribly much. He is only in by, what, 4 points, 5 points, or something like to that effect. A win here, that would be incredibly important for his championship challenge. And not only that, it would just throw another rut into the field in terms of who can actually get into the championship. And there's, between this race and the remaining ones, there are 7 regular season events left. We could potentially, Evan, see some craziness happen in this race that will lead to the other races being affected in terms of how teams will decide to drive on the track. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that the correct way, but I just see a lot of a butterfly effect that can happen from this race.
And the lights are out on top of the pace car as well, so we are going to get set for the restart here. Kyle Kamer saying that he wanted to pit, just never saw pit road open, so must have missed that when it was an option for him. So he actually didn't even want to stay out and mix things up like this, but he's going to be on the front row. Matthew Mara on the older tires did. He's citing the fact that they have so few green flag laps on the tires that it should not matter. But what I can promise is, not to which extent, but certainly both those cars on the front row who did not decide to come in and take tires are going to be on the oldest and slowest rubber of the race leaders in this one, and that could certainly have an effect on how this race shakes itself out and maybe how crazy this restart is. Because, I mean, we just saw with everybody on the same strategy, 3-4 crazy restarts in a row. Who knows how this one is going to shake out as we get set to go back underway with a restart with 19 laps to go from Pocono Raceway. Pace car going to be in this time. Let's see what Mara can do. Old tires inside and outside of row number 1. And there's the onboard look in sim with the driver of the number 23 Toyota. Green flag flies. 19 laps to go at Pocono. Morrow well clear of everybody else that raced down to turn number 1, so he is clear of the chaos. Now here comes a challenge. Fresh tires for Renage. Fresh tires Eberhardt. 3 wide for the race lead in a drag race to the tunnel turn. Who backs out? It's going to be Morrow on the outside. Who plays chicken? He'll fall back to 3rd. Renage Eberhardt continue nose to nose for the race lead. Renage on the outside may have the better spot as they look in turn number 3, still on each other's door, but outside line Andrew Renage, lap 57. He is your new race leader.
It's no surprise that Renage is in the lead after starting in the back of the field. It's big trouble back in the front stretch. There's a lot of cars involved, Evan.
Joseph Tice, the number 1 Chevy, the first car that I saw spin. Doesn't look like there's a ton of damage, but what happened? And that is a little bit of blocking gone wrong. He was, I think, trying to draft off a chain bliss. There were 3 wide, and when the one went to make a move, maybe a late squeeze by the 36 of Liam Sheen, but it forced the one into the 25. He spun out, and if our producer Hugo Luis can get us an onboard shot with Eric Stanford, because the 19 car with an incredible wreck avoidance to somehow not get into either of the cars, the one machine spinning, nor the slow car on the inside of the racetrack that had gotten into him. Check this out from his perspective.
Yeah, trying to exactly see how this happened. See, the one car, he's going to be very quickly involved. It looks like he got loose from touching a fender, and a really nice bit of wreck avoidance there from Stanford.
And that is how the car stays in one piece. We are pacing now at lap number 59. Here's a shot from high and above the virtual Pocono Raceway. Not really an incident you see at any other track, only here with the way the drafted works and how wide that straightaway is down to turn number 1. But if I would have told you when we were 30 laps in and caution free, Dylan, that we'd get 5 yellows in 20 laps, I think you would have been hard-pressed to believe me, but that's the case. This thing has opened itself wide open, and of course, Renage now leading for the first time.
Nah, I would believe you. I would believe you absolutely. Pocono, like I said, it has a flair for the dramatics. You really can never expect anything less than the unexpected when you come to the tricky triangle. Everybody at this who races at this circuit always likes to say it is one of the most difficult. You can set the car up for 2 corners, but you're going to have to compensate for the one. It's a fixed setup series, so every car they're struggling with the same exact things, and then it really does come down to skill, and a lot of cars are going into the Evan. Oh, some of them are giving a little bit of a dipsy-do and fooling others.
Eberhardt from second faked it out. He went back up. So did the car behind Kyle Kamer, but he opts to be the first driver in. So he's committed. He's going to come down for fresh tires. Can't tell you with certainty when the last time Kyle Kamer was down onto the pit lane, but I would believe this is 3rd set of tires that he's putting on of 4 available, and he feels like giving up P3 is enough to do so. So we talked about track position versus fresh rubber. Kamer is in for 4, and this is going to drop him at least outside of the top 15.
It's going to be a mad dash to the end of this race, because once we get going again, there's going to be, 14 laps left in it? That's not a lot of time, although it's going to be a lot more time at Pocono than most other tracks. You're going to see a lot of beating and banging, the likes of we haven't been seeing in this race so far. Now, we did see some side-by-side action happening through the first half of the race. You know, the only green flag stretch here that went uninterrupted by any cautions. That was, drivers were racing hard but respectfully. I think that there's going to be a little less respect here in the last part of this race.
And just scanning through the field, Kamer right now being shown in 18th position. It could always get a little bit better or worse, but I think that's pretty accurate to where he is going to end up in this one. And, you know, let's talk about some of the bubble drivers. Let's kind of look at this from the perspective of the points, because we talked about the bubble coming into this evening. If the season ended today, Gary Sexton would be the first, or I guess the last driver in. Eric Stanford would be the first driver out. Well, Stanford's doing okay. He's running P14. That's not awful. Gary Sexton running in 9th. That's pretty good. He stands to benefit a lot because there's as well some drivers further up the road in the points from them that, again, as we mentioned off the top, not making a start in this race. Bradley Burke, I believe maybe one of those drivers is he's not on track here this evening. He came into this evening 10th in the points. And, how about Steve Soa, 20th in the points, 33 points out of a transfer spot, but, he's running 15th. I mean, he's kind of that good middle ground. We talked about Soa and Kaczynski kind of on the bubble, but a little bit further down. Kaczynski needs to take advantage of this race. Unfortunately for the 30, he's been in some of the chaos, so Soa may actually leapfrog Kaczynski out of tonight if they finish where they run now. So those are all those little mini battles, little stories that are going to be big factors points-wise at the end of the night. That, again, tonight when you have some of the top runners not in the field, those are the kind of guys that need to benefit from them.
You're also going to see some high challenges from drivers who are currently on the outside looking in, or are not necessarily on the outside, but just in. I mean, if we're talking about a driver like Gary Sexton, he has a real opportunity to win this race. It's going to take a little bit of luck, especially with some of the top names this race so far, but it can happen. I mean, if you're looking at a driver like Brett Nichols, look at that. He is in 5th place right now, and he is currently 23rd in the standings, quite a ways back. I mean, we're talking about win and you're in. For drivers like him, you have to win, and if not, you're basically out.
This time, the magic number going to be 14 laps to go. Fresh tires. Kyle Kamer, 18th position on back as we get set to try it again from Pocono. Green flag flies. We're back underway. Everybody holds their position to the start-finish line. Now they can move. Look at Dylan Jones. He goes to the inside. Farina snaking, trying to break the draft, and they're 3 wide behind and battle for P6.
Forget about 3 wide. There were 4 wide for a second before they all committed into turn 1. Coming out of turn 1, Eric Stanford gets a little bit loose as he rides all the way up to the wall. Eberhard and Andrew Fernandez, they are so far right now in front of the other competitors. Well, maybe not so far, but at least far enough where it's a 2-car battle for the lead off of the restart. 14 laps left, 13 once they cross the line here. And look at this, Eberhard's going down the inside. Caution. Caution comes out. Evan, another restart. And those tires, well, it's going to come into play.
And it was Adam Benefiel on his lid. Let's take a second look at what happened. Benefiel was not happy over the radio, and you can see the wall that he hit, which is why he ended up on his lid. A little bit tough to see because we're working with 76% relative humidity. That's why it looks to be a little bit hazy, but there he is on his side. It was the cars on his outside. So we got the 23 of Mara and the 9 of Washington. They get together, and Benefiel had nowhere to go, and you can see the opening in the wall that he hit. That's why it was such a massive hit for the 83 into the fence and up and over. Here's his view.
Yeah, trying to look at exactly what happens. I mean, if you're trying to go 3 wide out of the tunnel turn, you've got to be careful, and things can be unfair. Things can go very wrong, even if you are not at all involved in the incident. Look at the gap that was held between both drivers, and wow, look at that. You cannot get a worse hit at Pocono Raceway than that with the new configuration, and getting thrown over again by the 42 car of Tom Morano. I mean, that's just a hard hit. And, you always have to worry about the safety of the drivers if that happens in an actual race. Obviously, there would be some upheaval, but how are you supposed to get the safety workers back out on the track as quickly as possible without little openings like that?
Here's an onboard look with Steve Durham behind where it all happened. You can see the car into the fence. Look out in front and behind you, flipping in the rear view mirror. He got a little bit of contact with the outside wall, trying to avoid that. Somebody else who got destroyed was Tom Morano in the 42. As we mentioned, I mean, he was minding his own business. He was behind all of it, and when that car bounced off of the outside wall, or the inside wall, I should say, it came back up and clipped him in the right front, so he got a bit of damage from that as well. And I think the biggest wreck that we've seen so far tonight from Pocono, now we slow it down for a 6th caution flag, and again, incident-free through the first half, but since then, a lot more take as opposed to give.
You know, I know we were talking about how last year's it was called a rain delay, or a rain actually. It was finished due to rain. Thankfully, there is no rain that can hit the virtual Pocono Raceway, so we don't have to worry about that, or even the daylight ending, just like what happened at the race in the Cup Series yesterday. It's some very nice conditions for a race at Pocono that we typically do not always see once you go up into the Pocono Mountains. I know that for the Pocono Raceway president, Ben May, he's definitely loving seeing some clear blue skies with some clouds sprinkled in throughout. Yes, it's a little hazy, it's a little humid, but it's clear, there's no rain in sight, and there's nothing to worry about.
And with those conditions, we're looking at 74 degrees Fahrenheit. Track temp a little bit higher than that, actually. And, of course, with the realistic weather and dynamic sky on, which means that iRacing pulls the weather data live from Pocono and does its best to replicate it. That temperature going up and down. Track temp right now, 91 degrees Fahrenheit, so pretty hot and slick out there. Matthew Barr is going to claim responsibility for the caution. He had a back and forth with Adam Benefiel over the radio in disagreement on who did it, and stronger words from Benefiel's camp towards Mara. Mara going to claim responsibility, so he will get the end of the longest line penalty. If you may be new to RSR competition, if you cause the yellow and do not claim it, and it is assigned to you as fault post-race, you'll get 2 penalty points instead of, if you just claim it, you get a single penalty point. 7 penalty points will cause a 1-race suspension. You do lose a penalty point per clean race. So that is kind of the incentive to claim responsibility for incidents that you cause. And I don't think it really matters for Mara or Benefiel at the end of the day, because they both look pretty damaged, and Mara's been a half a lap behind the race leaders as is.
Yeah, it's not going to matter either way. You know, they were still going while you were talking. They were still chapping or yelling, yapping at each other during this caution that's about to go back to green flag racing. I'm very cautiously optimistic to see how these drivers will react once we go back to some green flag racing. I know drivers like Andrew Fernandez, excuse me, was not so, they were not so happy to see more yellow flag racing. 1 was fine because it helped them get back into the game, the fight for first. 2, okay. How about 3, 4, 5, or maybe even 6? At that point, it starts to become a little bit of some sloth racing, and you just want to get through this race. 10 laps to go once we get to the line.
This time by, going to be 10 laps to go from Pocono. Longest we've been since halfway was a 4-lap run. Green flag flies. Let's do it again. 65 down from Pocono. Friedrich going to lead to turn 1. Everhart second. Jones in third. They fan out 2-3 wide behind them. Watch the battle for second, though. The 11 trying the outside, but it doesn't stick.
Jones gets very loose and comes all the way up to the wall, is able to keep it very steady, but we're having some 3-wide action happening behind the field, and look who is up into the top places. Actually, into 6th place, it's Liam Sheen, who, if you remember, was part of an incident that happened before the first yellow. It led to him going a lap down, getting a 40-second penalty for speeding into pit lane. All of a sudden, he is within striking distance for a potential win or a podium.
And remember with Dylan Jones as well, claimed responsibility for an incident at lap number 44. That was no more than just over 20 laps ago. He's now back up in the battle for the race lead once more. There was nearly a wreck off for the restart. Joseph Tice got hit by Rhett McBride. Did an incredible job at saving that car in turn number 1, so we stay green. And it allows us to have the battle for the race lead that is starting to shape up at a turn number 1. Eberhardt stalking the 88. Freitas going all over the racetrack to try to break that draft. The difference between 1 to a car length. Here we go side by side for 5th. And it is Liam Sheen on the inside around Nichols. Here comes now Gary Sexton to the bottom.
Look at Brian Chambliss. He almost got completely loose and out of gear. He almost came back up to the outside of the track as there are some more drivers getting loose through turn 3. Oh man, we're going to have a wild showdown, as you said before the race, Evan. A wild hoedown as this race draws to a close.
And it's Nichols now trying to go to the bottom, but he can't do it. Jared Bogard, we haven't talked about him. He blocks him to the inside to be the first one to take a crack at the inside of the 13 Ford of Sexton. So now they're on each other's doors. Austin Wagner to the bottom of the 55. All of this going on for position 6 on back. Tighter 2x2 than they were for the restart. There's the fight for second, though. Dylan Jones to the outside on Eberhardt, trying to get the pass done now because Freitas is starting to pull away, and the 11 car slices in front. P2 is his.
Freitas is starting to slice away. The gap the last time they were at the line, just 0.15 seconds over Daniel Eberhardt. This time it's 0.6 seconds over Dylan Jones. And Jones definitely wants to show Freitas who is boss at this track. But he has a little bit of time he needs to gain back. Daniel Eberhardt still fighting with Michael Lorea, who was leading the majority of the laps in this race. He's probably going to get those that extra bonus point for most laps led. Still, lots of action in the back of the field. We have some 3-wide action all over 8th place.
And that was Thomas George, the blue and black number 9, the Sirius XM entry. He was really loose at a turn 1, checked it up to save it, and it allowed some drivers to make some dives inside and out to try to get around him. He's currently enthralled in a battle with the 8 machine of Kyle Kamer. Kamer can't do it, pulls his box crush Chevy back in line behind, and it is now Nichols and Sexton going at it. That one for 10th and 11th on track, but it is all behind the battle up front. Race leader Andrew Freitas got clear of the battle for second. He pulled himself to a 4/10 advantage as this battle back here rages on. Dylan Jones is 4/10 off of him, not necessarily closing. Let's watch those intervals up front. There's the group. Freitas leads, and then Jones, Eberhardt, and Lorea 2, 3, 4.
It's really a battle between the top 4. That is all that will keep a victory from happening. And I just want to let you know, Liam Sheen just let Jared Mogard go by, at least for the time being, as he's going to try and present a battle out of turn 3. They are working together to try and catch the front 4 drivers and hope to mount some sort of comeback. But a yellow flag again. Big wreck in the back of the field, someone just said. And wow, some big damage. Thomas George, he might be out of the race. Not exactly sure. He gets the car going again, but a big hit, Evan.
Well, let's go on board with him to the inside of Rhett Nichols. Got a little bit loose. You can see it there with the onboard. The 9 just bobbled, and when he did so, he pushed up and into the 55. Nichols was into the outside wall, came back down, it hooks the 9, and it is Thomas George who gets the worst end of it all, and I think it all started by that small mistake on his part.
Yeah, this is one of the few incidents we can say today that have been entirely the one driver's fault who not only was involved, but also got the worst of the incident. Just you drive in, get a little loose, especially in that turn 3 exit, which can be very deceiving for a lot of drivers, and that's what happens. Not much you can complain about there except for yourself. Unfortunate for George, who was having a great race, but for the time being, it allows drivers like Liam Sheen and Jared Mogard to catch up. And remember, Sheen, he is very far out of the playoff hunt. He is currently sat in 24th place right now, not at all where he wants to be. He's around 60 points back of that playoff cut line. And for somebody like him to possibly have a chance to win this race and lock himself into the playoffs, that would be massive. Now, Jared Mogard, who does not have any wins, but is currently sat 7th in the championship, well, a win here would do nothing more than just guarantee that spot. The other drivers who are at the front of the field, we're talking about drivers such as Fernandez and Jones, Eberhardt, Larea. There's nothing to worry about there. This race means more to a driver like Liam Sheen than any of the front 4.
And now we're at an interesting point. We talked about this earlier. Track position versus tires. All these race leaders can come get fresh rubber if they want it, but we are likely to be pushed into overtime. So you're only going to have at minimum 2 laps, at maximum several sets of 2 laps to go. Do these cars actually pit or do they bail? Dylan Jones decides to pull out, half of them within a foot of the barrels, but some are in 4 tires. Eberhardt, Washington, Sexton, Nichols, Wagner, and Moore. It is a 50-50 split on if they want service.
But can you see who that split was? Most of the drivers who went out into pit lane were in the back half of the leaderboard at the moment. The only driver from the front of the field was Eberhardt, and he, I'm not sure if he's going to be happy with that decision, because now you're going to be very far back in the field because of the fact that not many other drivers went down into pit lane. I don't know if that was the correct call for Eberhardt there. He goes from having a potential top 4 finish, a possible win, to now worrying if he'll even be able to get back up into the conversation. I think it might take some sort of incident to happen for him to even get back involved, because I'm trying to look at how many people exactly he will have to pass to get back into a spot where he can get the lead. It's around 12 drivers. So exactly what we were saying, if you are trying to decide whether or not to pit, go with what the drivers in front of you decide, and Eberhardt did not decide that.
It is, in fact, exactly 12 drivers, because he's currently scored in 13th. Now, it is not all equal up the road from him. 1st through 7th, plus Steve Soa in 10th. All on right now it is 19-lap old tires. Joseph Tice ahead of him in 11th is on 14-lap old tires. And then Rhett McBride 8th, Michael Kaczynski 12th on 10-lap old tires. So that's what all these staggered restarts kind of wreak havoc, especially on our sake, Dylan, for trying to calculate the fuel strategies. You have like 2 or 3 different ones where it's a 4-lap difference one way or another. I'm not sure if, the 9-lap tires are going to be that much better off than 14-lap old tires. Heck, I don't know if the fresh tires are going to be that much better off than any sort of old tires. However, you've kind of made your bed and you got to sit in it. This race, by the way, will be extended for our first attempt at a green-white checkered finish. And as always, you got to get to the white flag for this race to be official. Otherwise, you re-rack them and restack them as many as 3 attempts if necessary.
I was talking a lot about what this race would mean to a driver like Liam Sheen. Don't forget, Eric Stanford, he's just on the bubble, just on the outside in 17th. He is 5 points behind Gary Sexton for that final playoff spot at the moment. He is one of those drivers we were talking about earlier, actually before this race even started, Evan, that 5 points that can be made up massively in one race's time. He's going to be restarting in 6th, which is going to be on the outside lane. Is that going to be a good choice for him? We haven't really seen the outside lane do much and put much of a battle up to the drivers starting on the inside, especially when the tires start to get, there's some traction that is being lost right at the restart of the race. Not sure exactly what we're going to see here. I would be very happy to see them only have to make one attempt, but don't hold your breath and hope that's going to be the case here.
Let's see how this plays out for what could be the final restart of the night. This car down and in for the back of the field, now to the front row. It'll be Andrew Faridas and Dylan Jones side by side for a green-white checkered at Pocono. 2 laps to go, and the 88's got a great jump in the race to turn 1.
What an awesome jump for him, but what he will struggle with is he doesn't have anyone pushing, and a yellow flag right away. You see the driver there immediately leaves the race. We'll try and see exactly who that was. Tamarano, we're watching alongside him, and confused at what happened here. He has a really big head of steam. Oh, and his engine just went. It seemed like maybe shifted into gear or out of gear. I'm not exactly sure what happened there, Evan.
That looks like a misshift. Let's listen. Yeah, I mean, you could see it go from 9,100 to 9,800 RPM. I think that was meant to go to 4th, went to 2nd.
That is the opposite of what the result is that you would like. I don't think... could you imagine... could you imagine what is through his head right now? You're on the verge of a decent finish, and then with 2 laps to go, you've just spent over an hour and a half in this session, almost 2 hours, and you throw it all away with an accidental misshift. You don't really see that at all in any sort of racing. Just unfortunate for him.
I think it's happened to everybody once, and you just hope that the time that you do it is, when you're racing with your buddies at midnight in a hosted session and not on a green and white checkered restart of your Monday night race on TV. And an unfortunate end, as you mentioned, for the Sletton Company's Ford Mustang. Tom Morano, a big supporter of the series. And as well, I feel real bad for Matt Mara. I mean, how has his race turned around? Not that long ago, we were talking about him being a top 10 car. He gets into an incident. He claims responsibility for it. That drops him to the back with damage. Now there's nowhere for him to go as Morano wrecks in front of him, and Mara going to be lucky to escape with 22nd or 23rd. My, oh my, how has his second half of the race changed?
Well, Mara actually, as you said that, just left the event. So he's currently sat in 22nd. It looks like that is where he's going to finish, as Tom Morano has left the race as well, and everyone outside. Only he might lose one position. I don't think it'll happen, though. But if he does lose any position, it's only one. As you see that the in-person camera right there takes the VR headset off. Maybe it was something with virtual reality interfering with his real life work. I love VR, but sometimes it could be hard if you're trying to reach for something out of virtual reality and it ends up being wrong. In that case, just a catastrophic failure. But we're getting ready for another green-white checkered. We're going to have the pace car go around for at least one more lap here, Evan. Do any drivers possibly look at going into the pits, or is that has that ship sailed?
I think if you were going to commit, the ideal was, for Eberhard and co, that the decision to pit was because you did not think this was going to be completed on that first green-white checkered attempt. Now, that really didn't give them much time to do anything on the last one. Granted, we did a drag race of about a couple hundred feet down to turn 1, and then the yellow came out immediately, so they don't gain any positions. Eberhard still the first car on the fresh rubber, but he is in 12th position on track now, so they didn't really gain anything. I think at this point, you are staying out to go the distance, and it is really foggy down at that end, humid with the haze in turn number 3. So that's just one of the most recent kind of graphical updates to the iRacing service. Hard to believe you look back at some of these RSR broadcasts from, 5, 6, but even, recently, just 3 years ago, how much better this sim looks and how much work iRacing has put into the visual end of it all. But one thing that maintains every year is a lot of these drivers. And we're going to get set to try again. Lights out on top of the pace car. We will try for green, white, checkered attempt number 2. 21 cars still on the lead lap for this one.
Really curious to see what the strategy for these drivers will be heading down into turn 1. I mean, obviously, if you're starting from the lead, you're going to get the biggest jump. You control the field once the pace car goes off, so there should be no worries there. If you're on the outside lane, if you're Dylan Jones and Michael Larea, you're going to be pushing each other, trying to get a run going. It's almost, you almost want to be starting in third compared to second and fourth, especially second or fourth, just to get somewhat of a jump in the draft. But at the same time, I mean, we're talking about very minimal things that add up. There are so many factors that go into play into how a driver is able to restart a race. It could end up being great. It could end up being very poor. All I know is we're going for a second attempt at a green-white checkered in this race, originally scheduled for 75 laps, 187.5 miles. Well, we're going to possibly 80 laps, which is obviously at the 200-mile mark.
So let's see if we can do it this time through. Fridas Jones, front row. Mogard, Lariah, 3-4. And Eric Stanford in position number 5. Green flag in the air. It's attempt 2 at a green and white checkered from Pocono. Mogard, a nose to the inside of Jones. Can he challenge into turn 1? 2 wide, 3 wide behind. But it is Fridas, the race leader in the turn 1. Now here comes Jones to the inside. Mogard on the bumper as well, fighting for the race lead.
Mogard almost getting a calamity out of that attempt to go into second, but he's able to stay right with him. And look who else is there. Eric Stanford in P4. He's going to have to go around the outside, though, because there's trouble, actually. Trouble in the back. Brian Chambliss is out of the race, possibly, along with the number 14 car of Austin Wagner and the number 15 car, trying to see exactly who that is in the field. We'll have to watch the replay, but not the number 15 car. We'll have to watch it here, but just watch this. It looks like it might have been the 55 car.
There was a lot of contact in that group, and you could see Chambliss was the first one to go around. I think it was the 7-5 of Soa, who got on the left rear quarter panel. We just talked about Steve Soa needing a good night to get up in the points to take advantage of this race, and he gets into the back of the 25 machine there. I saw a little bit of a bobble by Chambliss. I don't think Chambliss got into the corner like he wanted to, and then Soa tried to go to the inside and just hit him in the quarter panel. Those two involved. The 14 of Austin Wagner also in the mess, and we will push it to our very last straw as we'll be headed to attempt number 3 of the green and white checker.
You really hope that all of these drivers take it clean through the second to last lap, the penultimate lap of this race, because I have a feeling that if they do get to the white flag, that any potential caution that would be called regularly, it might be a little bit excused, and it would allow for a finish to this race. You'd at least hope that, and hope that things are clear. However, you really never know. Now, we're at an hour 41 mark. The time limit is 2 hours, 25 minutes. We're not even close to that, obviously. Still a 40 minutes away, but you almost have to ponder, like, what could this race have been like if the clean green flag run through the first half of it all did not happen? I mean, it's a completely different race. It's night and day. I don't know what happened, Evan.
And also, to kind of the opposite point of that, what about if that yellow just shy of halfway never happens? Because if that doesn't happen, we don't have these restarts. We don't have all these, attempts of grouping everybody back up. This race had a legitimate shot of going the distance without incident. Instead, since lap number 35, if you count that caution, which involved the 33 of Rada back on lap number 35, we have had now 9 caution flags.
9 caution flags, and I think the most full laps that we've actually completed while under caution has been, what, 4 laps since that halfway point?
Yeah.
If that, right. And definitely slows the broadcast down, slows the race down, and a lot of drivers have shown their frustration either via chat or via the voice chat that all the drivers have access to, they can talk to. Could you imagine if the real world, if a NASCAR race had driver chats? That would be something I'd pay a lot for.
I remember back in the day at the plate tracks, drivers used to be able to talk with each other on each other's radios, and just think if they were all on the same radio channel. Granted, we're thinking this race at 9 yellows has been rough. Of course, earlier in the year we saw a series record, 20 cautions at Martinsville. That took up 51% of all the laps, as that one required an overtime finish. It was won by Daniel Scott, a first career win. Oftentimes, when you get a lot of wrecks and the races go to overtime, it tends to benefit the drivers without wins, but up front, still a stronghold of 3-time race winner Andrew Friedage. And of course, we talked about the big implications here for Dylan C. Jones. He has been granted a minimum participation waiver to qualify for the playoffs because he did not sign up until after the halfway point of the regular season. A win here, as he'll be on the outside of the front row, locks him into the playoffs. It would also boot one of the drivers currently on the playoff grid based on points out, so that would be Gary Sexton on the outside after coming into tonight in P16. These are all the various repercussions, not to mention the fact that you've also got Jared Bogard, one of the highest running drivers in points without a win, on the inside of row 2 in 3rd. He would also love to steal the win here.
The only driver who does not need to win to certify their standing in the playoffs is Friedage. I mean, he's had a few wins in this season so far. Maybe it's not as much as he'd like, but when we say not as much as he'd like, 3 wins in this one compared to 7 in the previous winter series that was run. He's really the driver that can compete with really anybody and always be competitive at every single track. He's currently in first, but with Jones not having a win, with Mogard not having a win but being 7th place in the standings, with Eric Stanford literally 5 points out of the playoffs as we speak, there are so many implications that can happen. Rhett McBride, another driver, currently in 6th. He does not have a win either. Liam Sheen, he's back in 23rd, no wins. A lot of drivers, 1 win, all of them are going to be fighting over it. This could mean so much to all of their championship hopes.
And Stanford only that far back because he finished 30th last week, lost 5 spots in the points in 1 week alone. Here we go, the final attempt at a green-white checkered finish, and Friedage is gone. Green flag in the air. They have to get to the white flag if we're going to race this one out. The next flag may end it. 3 wide behind. It's Everhart trying to make an inside line work, but the fight's going to be for second. Jones slips. It's Mogard to P2.
Eric Stanford will also lose out, courtesy of Dylan Jones losing out there. All of them are fanning out along the long pond straightaway, but as we head into the tunnel turn, that lead is growing to almost half a second, but it's not going to stay that way as Friedage actually gets a little bit loose coming off of the tunnel turn, and a yellow has been called. A big wreck, and that will be the end of this one, unfortunately. The checkered flag will wave as the green-white checkered is going to end this one.
And I think Mogard had a chance. I mean, he was closing in But this race will end under caution flag conditions, and it looks like it was the 19 of Eric Stanford who wasn't able to squeeze it on the bottom as he pushed up, tagged the cars on his outside, and it was the 11 and the 36. There it is. Then it's Gary Sexton involved, and everybody else piles on in.
Wow, just seeing it from the helicopter view, you see two abreast, a little bit of a push on the outside, going up a little bit wide, and things just get really bad really quickly for a lot of drivers. 5 involved by my counts, and as they are currently heading through the tunnel turn on the last official lap, it's going to be a 4th win for the championship leader, but this is going to help out drivers like Mogard and McBride certify their speed even more. They don't really need a win at this point in the season, but having a great spot like this is going to help out quite a lot. And trying to look back, Eric Stanford, this is going to be a big result for him. 5th place after starting 25th. That's 20 positions up. Did not qualify, but you know, you got to feel bad for a driver like Liam Sheen, who had a chance at a great run, finishes 9th after restarting from 4th place. But this is going to be the checkered flag here, Evan. An unfortunate end to an interesting race we had.
And across the start-finish line, checkered flag in the air, and it is, as mentioned, win number 4 on 2020. It belongs to the defending series champion, Andrew Friedage. So close. Mogard, McBride, 2nd and 3rd. Oh, how a race win here tonight could have helped those drivers out to lock themselves in to a postseason bid. Instead, they'll take a lot of points, and that's still very good. But if they end up at the outside at the end of the season, they may have looked back to this race here at Pocono as maybe that missed opportunity. There's the onboard look with Andrew Friedage back into victory lane. His race wins in 2020 coming at Texas, Richmond, Dover, the All-Star race, which does not officially count towards record keeping at North Wilkesboro, and now his 4th points win of the year tonight at Pocono, and I think he's got some celebrating to do.
I would celebrate if I was him. He fought back from a very low place on the grid. Obviously, it was his decision not to go. He started back in 20th, but with all the cautions, kind of don't think it's that surprising as much as it possibly could have been with that win for him. And I'm trying to look any driver that qualified today and finished the race in a high enough position, trying to decide who gets the Dopper Durham on the Radar Hard Charger Award, that $5 reward to the biggest mover who qualified for the race. Well, I think you've got to look pretty far back in the field, Evan, because from my calculations, the highest place with a good, advantage from the qualifying positions, Sean Callis, who finishes in 12th after starting the race in 16th. That's at least what I've seen. So a +4 is what we've seen at the best from the qualified drivers.
Yeah, not a huge gain, but enough to walk away maybe with the $5 bonus. There is the celebration. Yeah, hey, I'm not going to complain about it. You can send it my way as we take a look at tonight's full race results for the Pocono Raceway. Margin of victory don't mean nothing because we had to pace on through. Not many times do we extinguish all 3 attempts at overtime in RSR competition, but we did so tonight. Friedage, Mogard, McBride, 1, 2, 3. We hope to chat with them shortly. Of course, you see Flat Out Motorsports with the duo in there of Michael Araya, Joseph Tice, with Brett Nichols, David Washington, Liam Sheen, your top 10.
And going a little bit further back at Steve Durham in 11th, Sean Callis. We were just saying he will get that reward in 12th. Brian Chambliss, he had a good, a very potentially nice finish. Obviously, did not work out for him. Michael Kaczynski finishes 14th. Thomas George 15th. Steve Soa, who was involved in a lot of incidents, ends up finishing 16th. Austin Wagner, Gary Sexton, who needed some points to not get it as to some of the other drivers, Kyle Kammer, and look who it seems that ended up very far back in the field in Dylan Jones. So he needed that win. It did not come for him, Evan.
It could have benefited a ton, and then through the back of the pack here tonight, again, only 28 drivers make a start. Couple of drivers expect them to be back with us next Monday night. Rodden, Davis, Mara, Morano, Benefiel, all these cars, though, not making it. Our total distance tonight, which went from scheduled 75 all the way through, actually, 84, 85 laps of official competition. That's a look top to bottom at your full race results. Let's take a very quick opportunity to step aside. When we come back, we'll talk with your top finishers from Pocono. Four-time winner Andrew Friedrich. We'll chat with him next as Race Spot's coverage of the RSR Full Throttle Cup Series powered by Boosted continues from Pocono.
At North Wilkesboro, North Carolina, where the field is rolling out for the start of today's 400-lap race on this .625-mile racetrack. And just as the field comes all around turn number 4, the sunshine peeks through, helping warm things here. Bill Elliott leads him down. Benny Parsons on the outside. The green flag flies, and the first Union 400 Winston Cup race from North Wilkesboro is underway. Everybody nicely through turn number 1 and 2 as Bill Elliott has the lead and Dale Earnhardt has jumped into second position, followed by Benny Parsons and Bobby Allison. Oh, here we go. It's just about to go away. They both coming out of turn 4. Earnhardt gets the lead. We had just heard from our spotters that Neil Lyons. Dale Earnhardt is on his last lap. This will be his 24th career win. Dale Earnhardt wins the first Union 400 at North Wilkesboro.
And back live for the virtual Pocono Raceway, where RacespotTV's coverage of the 2020 RealSimRacing Full Throttle Cup Series powered by Boosted continued with tonight's Boosted.Club 75. 14 races of the season now down, only 6 left to go until we hit the playoffs. Happy that you're with us, though, for some post-race action with our producer, Hugo Luis, myself, Evan Pasoko, and Dylan DeCoyle. We just went through the full running order. Now let's go trackside and talk with your top finishers. And it begins with race winner, driver of the number 88 Ford Mustang, Andrew Friedrich. For the 4th time in 2020, Andrew, you end up in victory lane, and I gotta be honest with you there, through all 3 attempts at the green white checker to finish, it looked like those cars behind you, if they had a little bit more time, may have been able to challenge. We saw you snake it all the way to the inside, back up top, trying to break the draft, and in the end, they never had the opportunity as track position helped you out there.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about Pocono. The last 3 times we've come here, we've won, and tonight we were really bad, honestly. We did not have a winning car. We got really lucky with track position and where we ended up with. I think if we had a long run there, it was going to be interesting. I learned a little bit from that first run, but every single restart, the draft is so big, I thought they were going to get around me, and I think maybe another 2 turns and they probably would have. So we got lucky with all the times of those cautions. It's a shame we couldn't go green and, race it out like we wanted to, but, a win's a win.
And you mentioned going green. I have to wonder, because this race was caution-free up until lap number 35, and the first thing that I thought when we had that yellow was, okay, now we can actually get to the end on fuel, essentially, from this point. I mean, that was kind of our halfway break. I thought there was a decent chance that happens. Instead, we go on to see, I think, 9 or 10 caution flags from that point. I mean, did anything change at that point from your perspective, did it actually helping you out? Because I mean, at halfway, you were some 5 seconds off of the race leader. If it had gone green, was that doable, or did that initial yellow, maybe not the 9 afterwards, actually help you out and maybe giving you a better opportunity to get into the picture after starting from so far back?
Yeah, I messed up my qualifying lap. That's why I was so far back. No, I really didn't have too much practice. The focus this year's on Road to Pro, so this kind of takes a back seat. And I hate to say I don't get as much laps as we used to, so it's kind of learning on the fly. And I think that first run, I really learned a lot that I wanted to apply if we were going to go green. But getting that caution definitely, helped us out. We closed up right to the leaders. I felt like I learned a lot, and I was able to hit the tunnel turn a lot better than some other cars, which I don't know if that would have helped in the long run, but definitely in the short run, we were passing some guys. And so, yeah, I think that caution, truthfully, may have saved us from finishing, tail end of the top 10.
Fourth race win for you this season. Again, you talk about, just trying to figure things out as they go, and it has seemingly worked out so far so good for you as you look for the title defense. Looking at the 6 races still to go before we go playoff racing, is there anything else to learn that can benefit you for the postseason? Or is it more so, maybe taking more gambles or trying to mix things up, try new things? I mean, what is left out there that can prep you for a run for the Full Throttle Cup any more than you already are right now?
Yeah, I think the last 2 years, really the last 3 years, we've made the Final Four, so we kind of have a game plan to know what to do. But it's, kind of treat these last 6 kind of like playoff races, maximize points, try to not make mistakes and get top 5s, kind of get into playoff mode and not making silly mistakes. So, if we can squeeze out a win every now and then, that's great. But, just kind of getting that mindset. And I still have to learn a lot with this low horsepower, high downforce. It's a struggle. I feel really, really confident when we go to tracks that, we have that low downforce and, the low downforce and high horsepower. But, these tracks, the 1.5 miles and over, it's still a struggle for me. It's still a learning process.
We'll continue our march towards the postseason with the trip to Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Of course, a race that you won in 2019. What are some of the unique challenges that the Brickyard presents?
It's really, really momentum based, especially with the car that we got, the 550 horsepower and the big spoiler. If you mess up the corner, it's gonna, hurt you. You could lose 3-4 spots. So it's just manage your tires. I think it's probably going to get tight, and just save those as best you can. I think it's going to be interesting with the tire allotments. Tonight really wasn't an issue with it, but I think future races is going to be whoever has that last set of tires at the end is going to win the race. So the strategy with that's going to come into play. And other than that, it's just try to hit your lines right and don't make mistakes.
Then I know worked out in the end with 3 attempts at a green to white checker to finish. Win number 4 on 2020, Andrew. Congratulations on the win as always, and we'll catch you next time out.
Thanks so much. Have a good night, guys.
Showing why he is the defending series champion. Made it look easy despite some of those struggles. It is Ferdinand in victory lane here tonight from Pocono. We'll continue on down through the running order. Second place tonight goes to Jared Bogard, and admittedly, I think Dylan, he thought he had an opportunity at that one late. Instead, the driver of the 00 had to settle for second, and he's with you.
Well, we were talking about it. Jared Mogard had a really nice run, a potentially race-winning run in that last restart. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for him. Jared, thank you for joining us here. Do you feel like you could have gotten the job done and overtaken Andrew for that race win if that actually ended under green?
I don't know. It would have depended on if we would have got through 3 there, coming to the white. But I don't know. I got through 2 really well, and then I had a yellow come out. But I think we could have got through 3 really well. Probably would have had a shot at him. I don't know if we would have got him, but would have had a shot.
With the season winding down to a point where it doesn't necessarily just become about wins for a driver like you, currently coming into this race, you're 7th in the point standings, but you've got a really nice lead over any potentially bubble playoff drivers. What are the last 6 races going to be like for you? Are you going to play a little conservatively? Are you going to drive aggressively? Because playoff points, obviously, they might not not necessarily hurt to get any of them as the season goes going forward. But when it comes to just point standings in general, you've got a good lead. Is it winning or is it just point racing for you?
I mean, I want to win. You know, we want to win at least one just to know that we can do it. I mean, we've been close, and you know, Andrew's the class in the field, so to be hanging with him is good. If you want to beat him to make yourself feel a little bit better. But I mean, yeah, we're sitting solid in the points, so just be smart and take the opportunities. You know, like tonight on that last restart, if it went green, you know, we had a shot, and guarantee it that if we were there going into free, had it gone to the end, we were going to send it and see what happened. But you know, just be smart and protect the lead, the points, but try to get the win before the playoffs, if not going into the playoffs. But yeah, just see what we try to keep going what we've been doing.
With a track like Indianapolis coming up next. Now, it's another 2.5 mile track. It's one that, although Pocono is so unique in the sense that all three corners are different, there is that one corner that is like Indianapolis in turn 3. What is the strategy going to be like at Indy? It's going to be very different to this track. Is it a track that you're strong at? Talk a little bit about that.
Truthfully, this track and next week I am not a fan of, but I always race well at. So I'm really looking forward to next week. But, you know, we seem to race well. Just like you said, it's tricky. All 4 corners, you gotta hit them just right. And to me, the style is kind of the same. Kind of, you gotta back the corners up and stuff like that. And try to keep the tires on it. But yeah, it's I'm really looking forward to it. But like I said, we always race well when we go there. So hopefully we can have the same result as we did tonight.
All right. Well, Jared, thanks so much. A great finish, the best of your season. Started or finished third in 2 straight races at both Bristol and Texas. And after a little bit of a rough patch, is starting to get back into a rhythm with that second place finish. So there's one more driver that we need to talk in Rhett McBride, a driver in a similar position to both to Jared Mogard in terms of being in without a win. And I've got to say, Rhett, how does this, I'm going to ask you the same opening question that I did ask with Jared. You're so far ahead in points. Does that mean the last 6 races for you are going to come down to points racing instead of necessarily going for the win?
No. I try to win every time I go out there. It's hard to do in this league. I mean, there's probably 10 guys easy that could win every Monday night. So if you win, then the points just kind of take care of themselves. So that's always the goal. We don't do it as much as we need to, but that's what I'm always trying to do.
So you also were one of the drivers that were involved in lead pack battles, but you were kind of in the secondary group, I guess you could say, throughout the entire day. You made your way back up. Can you put any of that courtesy to some breaks with cautions?
I don't know. You know, when we came in at the end, it was like, well, we came to get tires, and I thought more people would come in too, and nobody did. So I was thinking, okay, this probably isn't gonna end well. But to be honest with you, I'd get to rolling with those new tires, and I was kind of hoping that it was just gonna go green the whole way, because I felt like I could have got up there regardless, just because the tires were so good compared to everybody else. I think Daniel Eberhardt, he might have got tires right before I did or right after I did. So I think he had pretty good tires, or 2 tires. I'm not completely sure, but toward the end of the race there, we had the best tires out there. We just could not get, good position on the restarts, but it is what it is.
You know, Daniel Eberhardt actually went into the pits for a full set of 4 tires right before the first green-white checkered attempt happened. And we were kind of talking in the broadcast booth of, is this the right move? Because we were looking at track position to be the more important part. And obviously, with the drivers unable to go more than half a lap without wrecking and ending the race under yellow, Eberhardt actually was able to get into 4th place right outside the podium finishes. But with you being in P3, I mean, how much of this race for you was just trying to end up on the good side of the track? And for you, was that the outside or inside on the late restarts?
No, I think for sure you wanted to be on that inside line. And, you know, right there at the end, normally track position, and it was most of the night. I mean, if it was going to stay green, then track position, you know, was where you wanted to be. And if we hadn't had as many cautions, even track position would have been much more important. But when it came down to the end, if you just had that much better tires, tires made a difference. But for sure, starting on the inside was the way to go, and that just killed me all night. It seemed like every time we'd have a caution, I'd be on the outside, just trying to hang on. So I was happy though. I mean, there was a couple of restarts where we hung tough on the outside against some good cars and kind of won out on that. So it was just tough night. It was fun, the first part of it, kind of feeling out the tires to see where we needed to be at the end of the race on the second set, and that was what we were kind of strategizing for the whole race, and then everything just kind of broke loose at the end.
Now, you've had a really nice stretch of races here. In fact, pretty much over the last 6 races, or 5 races that is, you've only had 1 finish outside the top 10. If we go back even further, out of the last 8 races, you've only had 2 finishes outside of the top 10. It's definitely the right time to start getting hot, and you've matched your best finish throughout the season so far. How do you keep that momentum going to a point where you don't stall out before the big races start coming?
Yeah, I don't know. You just have to. I really like every track we go to before the playoffs start. So I'm looking forward to all those tracks, and I feel like we've been running pretty good this year. Even though I'm not a big fan of this package at all, it's kind of completely opposite of the way I like to. The way that I like to race, or the way I like the way the car feels. But that being said, we're running good this year, and I feel like we can maybe get a couple here this year. So no, we're going to keep the foot on the neck and keep pushing.
All right, well, thanks a ton, Rhett. Congratulations on a 3rd place finish and tying the best finish of the year for you. That win, it's going to come soon. Just give it some time. So, Evan, we've gone through all of the top 3 drivers, and we definitely have had some good insight from all of them. I like what they've said about, even though they have big point advantages, and I'm talking about the top, or the 2nd and 3rd place finishers here in Mogard and McBride, even with that point advantage for them, they're still going to go hard, and race for wins.
Yeah, and as well, taking a look at the updated points coming out of this one is, again, not a whole lot changes. Friedage gets win number 4. That breaks the tie that he had with Daniel Eberhardt. It's great in kind of the inner battle between those two. It'll give him 3 more bonus points to start the round of 16 for the postseason. But looking towards the cut, I mean, good nights for Steve Durham and Eric Stanford. They're back above the cut line. Bad night for Kyle Kamer. Of course, he drops now outside. He's 15th in points, but again, when you factor in wins, he's actually outside of the points by just 1 position. So there's a lot of drivers, I think, who we kind of touched on this midway. They could have made a real difference here tonight. Steal a top 10 with a lot of the big names missing tonight at Pocono. Kind of, get yourself a bit of a boost, and I don't think they really did that. Kaczynski, Soa, they both go +1. Rhett Nichols goes +2, but, Kaczynski's still 18th, Soa 19th, and Nichols 21st. I mean, they're inching their way And we talked off at the top that 30 points is totally doable over 7 races. Well, now you're saying, okay, 29 points is doable over 6. It is, but if you're only making up this much per week, not going to happen. You need to have a breakout night. I thought tonight may have been it. You do not want to hedge your bets on being the Cinderella story at Daytona at the end of the regular season. And that's where we look to next week when we head to Indianapolis Motor Speedway, because that's another track like Pocono in the sense that it is totally unlike anything else on the calendar. Could it be a place where somebody has, a bit of a niche preference to Indianapolis and say, hey, I'm really good at this racetrack. I can turn my top 10 average into a top 5. I think Indy is a place where we could see a first-time winner, or at least somebody, go 5 spots up from their average, get those points now, because when we get to the Glen and Daytona, unless you're a great road racer, you're probably going to lose some points there. We can kind of look back to Sonoma to get an idea of kind of who fits into that category. But these next 6 races, I think, are all awfully difficult. I would take advantage of those intermediate tracks coming up, because Indy next week certainly going to be a real difficult one, like tonight was at Pocono.
Yeah, and this isn't like a typical 40-car NASCAR lineup. You're thinking of here, Evan, 29 points. It might not seem so much if we're just talking about a normal NASCAR Cup Series race in the real world, but when you're only having somewhere around 30 drivers taking part in these full throttle Cup Series races, you're not going to have as many opportunities to make up that big of a margin. 29 points, that difference, it's amplified in this series. And Indianapolis, I do think that one of the problem areas in that track, it's going to be both turn 2 and it's going to be turn 4. And why is that? It's because they're going to be making very quick, very fast 90-degree left-handers without any time to cool the tires down in the short chutes between both turns 1 and 2 and turns 3 and 4.
Yeah, we look back to tonight's race. We talked about Pocono having such long straightaways in between the 3 quarters here, and we even heard it talk about the drivers post-race. They said that mistakes getting off of the corner with this low horsepower, high downforce package going to be awfully difficult to you if you mess up a turn. In Indianapolis going to be the same way. Also, tonight was a bit more forgiving. We saw some drivers overshoot turn 1 many times. Turn 2 was a bit more unforgiving. At Indianapolis, you miss the corner, you can get out of the gas, you might be in the fence. It is not as forgiving, so discipline as well, I think, be key. And it is going to be relatively similar to tonight. Going to be 75-lap race. We kind of have an idea of what the distance is going to be. And that's a race, I think, where you're going to want a bit more practice than just the 30 minutes that they're given before the race each night.
Yeah, and thankfully iRacing has the test drive option for all of these drivers, which if they're not taking advantage of already for the race just in this next Monday, then they're doing a disservice to themselves. Indy is a tough track. It's almost like a street circuit of sorts where there's no runoff area. It is such a thin track that if you make a mistake, you're going right into the wall. Your race is pretty much over, and probably a few of the trailers right behind you as well.
And we look forward to that next time out. But until then, that's it for us here tonight from Pocono. So on behalf of our entire team at RacespotTV and for your broadcast team tonight, for our producer Hugo Luis, for Dylan Coyle, and myself, Evan Pasoko, I want to thank you for tuning in and congratulate Andrew Faridas, now a 4-time race winner in 2020. He'll look to go back-to-back now at the Brickyard as we head to the virtual Indianapolis Motor Speedway next Monday, July the 6th. It's a 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time start. As always, that race and every race of the 2020 Real Sim Racing Full Throttle Cup Series, powered by Boosted, can be found right here on RaceSpot TV. Until next time, good night from Pocono.